So it appears Ann Reid is under fire from from a lot of conservatives, I should say, for a comment that's honestly a really interesting and fascinating debate because it's really hard to determine which is more important to conservatives, whether it's racism or it's your tax cuts and deregulation. That's always the question, right? So this is the comment that got Ann Reid under a lot of fire. So here's what the article says. It says, veteran MSNBC host Joy Reid recently made comments on Twitter regarding conservatives' secret desires to say the N-word. The tweet was immediately met with backlash from well-known Republicans. Quote, I'll say it again, people on the right would trade all the tax cuts for the ability to openly say the N-word like in the, quote, good old days. To them, not being able to be openly racist and discriminatory without consequence is oppression. Trump is the avatar for this freedom. And then a bunch of people, Barry Weiss and Dinesh D'Souza and all these people came out, really angry, saying it was really reckless comment. But let's be real here, man. A lot of conservatives and even conservatism as an ideology is just racist. And, I would say a lot of things, if not most things, have racial undertones to them. But certainly every time it seems like you see a politician who's trying to claim they're not racist, there's always a lot of evidence for them actually being racist. Like, remember when Mark Meadows had that whole situation where he said, oh, my nephew is black, calling me racist is offensive. And then they found a video of him a couple years ago being like, oh yeah, we're going to send Obama back from wherever he came from. And so anytime you see that kind of thing and you look into them, it's like, oh wait, they said a bunch of racist stuff. And it's so common. And yeah, there are a lot of white people and conservatives who do say the N-word in private with hard R. And you also got to really look at the history of this. I don't know how many of you guys know who Lee Atwater is, but he was a political strategist on, I think, the Nixon campaigns, I think all the way through H.W. Bush's first election, and then he died going into the second election for George H.W. Bush where he lost. But remember the Southern strategy, there's this audio of him talking about the Southern strategy, and he says, we had to change it up basically from saying the N-word, except he said it, full on with the hard R in that clip. And he says, you start saying being against forced busing and tax cuts and all this other stuff. And so there's ways to find loopholes sort of around being so abrasive and so upfront with your racism. And so there's a lot more concealed racism amongst these people. So, there's a Ben Shapiro tweet where he said something like, if you have an EBT card, wear a hat backwards, and have sagging pants, you're nothing at life or whatever. It's just finding these long way roads and being more, below the rung when it comes to the racism. Finding ways so that it's not super clear that you're being racist, ergo to give yourself plausible deniability. This is a tactic used by a lot of people who are trying to be shifty, is plausible deniability. To kind of serve as doubt in case somebody suspects that kind of thing from you. But this is definitely a very common thing, man. Racism is very, very prevalent in conservatism, with amongst conservatives. And so I wouldn't doubt that they would trade all the tax cuts, especially because when you're talking about, like, a regular conservative is not, really that rich, right? A lot of them are probably really poor. And so, the tax cuts aren't really helping them at all. So I'm sure if you said, hey, we'll cut you a deal, I don't know who'd be cutting this deal. It's a hypothetical, right? All the tax cuts get traded for your ability to say the N-word with the hard R. Am I really going to say that they're not going to take that deal? Come on. I mean, it's more personal. Clearly, people, I would say vast majority of people in general feel this need to feel good about themselves and feel this kind of superiority complex, feel like they have something over other people. And racism is just something that gives a lot of people, especially people who don't really have anything else going on for them, to be able to have that feeling, right? What was it, LBJ's quote? He said something like, give a white man someone to look down on, and you could pick his pockets, or he'll give you all of his shit. So it's pretty clear that racism runs very, very deep. And I think anyone to deny that is kind of crazy. And I would not disagree that like 70+% of conservatives would indeed take this trade. I really do not, because most of these people don't have that much money, or they're middle class or whatever. They don't really care about the tax cuts. It's really about, just racism, and there's so much racism embedded in the conservative movement and the Republican Party. It just kind of, it's just so ingrained in it, right? So it's hard to disagree with this comment, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. This may be pretty, usually this depends on where you fall on the political spectrum. Even inside a specific ideology, you might have a different perspective on this at different times in your life. So I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts on this one.